Bharani has a couple of different symbols that are associated with. One of the main symbols of it is the female reproductive organ. So what tends to happen with Bharani Nakshatra, you had with Ashwini, you had the latent potential. Well, nothing can come into being unless it's given birth to. And the same holds true for that divine potential. It has to be, given birth to. And it's really interesting because if you follow like the wheel or the cycle of creation, coming into being, going through life, ending one's life, reaching liberation, or potentially reaching liberation, then you're not born again. But let's say you're not reaching liberation and you have to come back into birth, but you have to cleanse yourself of what came before. Well, Bharani also is responsible for bringing souls back into being. And it's also connected to Yama. And Yama is the god of death. But what Yama actually did was he, basically was a very creative energy, even though he was the god of death, because he got rid of the old forms and basically channeled energy towards a new form. So here we have two symbols. We have the female reproductive organ, and we also have Yama. And just as anything is given birth to, well, there first has to be the labor pains. So generally, the processes that are connected with Bharani tend to require a lot of effort. There's generally some struggle that's involved. Some self-control has to be exercised as well. So in terms of, let's say, self-related planets, well, the person may lead somewhat of a difficult life, but they have learned much from the difficulties that they've been through. Right? It's interesting too, because Bharani Nakshatra, people who have self-related planets in Bharani Nakshatra tend to be really fascinated with death and transformation in general. Jim Morrison, I don't know if it was his son, one of his planets was in Bharani Nakshatra. I think it might have been his son. Yeah. And almost everything you heard about him had some concept of death related to it. He was absolutely fascinated by the subject. And so Bharani Nakshatra, the aspect of death that it's related to is death as the purifier, death as the cleansing of the old form and bringing into existence the new form. So what Yama actually did is he acted as an usher from one phase of existence to another. And that's basically the function of Bharani Nakshatra. Its Shakti is the power to cleanse and remove impurities, the power to take things away. And what is it taking away? It's taking away that old existence. It's taking away those things that don't work in our life anymore. It's taking away those outdated modalities of existence that we used to live and that used to be the standards of our existence. Well, those no longer have a place, so they must be gotten rid of, and that's what happens through Bharani Nakshatra. Yama also is a yogic concept. We think we have pranayama. Pranayama means breath control. And the concept here is the harnessing of energy. It's the harnessing of creative energy. And that's what tends to happen through Bharani Nakshatra. So you see, we have the energy of Ashwini, which is divine potential, and then that energy gets harnessed and brought into form. And that's what's happening through this particular cycle of creation. The basis above, below, and the result of this particular nakshatra, well, the basis above in the heavens is removal of life from the body. So the heavens are taking us away from a particular state of being, removing life from the body. The basis below, what's happening here on the planet, is the soul is getting carried to the ancestral realm. Well, what does that really represent? Well, reflecting back over past lives, reflecting back over where you have been previously, looking back over the past and seeing what you have previously learned. Okay? And the result of that is moving on to the next world, moving on to the next phase of our existence. The three gunas that are connected with Bharani Nakshatra, it's rajasic at its basis, so active energy at its basis, because it's doing an active thing. It builds upon that with rajasic energy, and it caps it all off with a tamasic energy, because you have to have that tamasic energy in order to create the form from the activity. The primary motivation of this nakshatra is artha, goal-directed activity, trying to achieve things in the material world, trying to attain a certain level of material pleasure. The ruling planet of Bharani is Venus. So that's interesting. If you look at the concept that we have Yama, the god of death, and we have Venus, which is a very creative planet, and also one of the ministers of the royal courts of planets. Here we have the concept of, wisdom. Here we have the concept of creativity with which the individual can move forward from the old form. And the Trimurti association here is Vishnu. Vishnu always changed forms. At the heart, it was always Vishnu. And here we have the very same concept reflected through Bharani.
And so with these nakshatras, when we're looking at something like the primary motivation, Ashwini was dharma, Bharani being artha. When we think about these qualities and planets in the nakshatras, how do we apply like the primary motivation? How does that fit in when we're trying to analyze or understand what a planet or point might mean in a nakshatra?
Okay. Well, let's say, for instance, trying to think of a particular house lord I could use, but let's start with the planet first. Let's say we're actually dealing with Venus. Yeah, Venus is what I was thinking about at first. Then my head went in two different places at once, but let's stick with Venus. That's probably a better one.
Yeah.
So let's say Venus is, let's just use a very simple explanation. Venus is wanting to achieve something. Okay, Venus is feeling a strong motivation to achieve something. In order to achieve that very thing, it's going to go through a process of likely having to undergo some trials for that thing to come into form. It's likely going to go through a process of reflecting back over what it has learned thus far. And it's likely going to go through a process of having to let go and go through a shift. Now, let's say Venus is a relationship ruler, and the person's getting into a relationship. Well, they may go through a period of reflecting over the past difficulties of a previous relationship, right? Or they may find that when they're forming a relationship, it's always difficult for them to form relationships. There's always an initial bit of tension or resistance before the shift happens, or they have a hard time letting go of the previous partner. These are all if Venus is ill-supported, right? Then that would really kind of be, for lack of a better way to put it, a double whammy, because you've got an ill-supported Venus in an ill-supported nakshatra,
right? And
that can create for a lot of problems. Yeah. But basically, that's how the artha concept would work. It would become very goal-directed. It's wanting to be in a relationship, depending upon the nature of the planet. Venus is going to be very rajasic about trying to get into a relationship, but it's going to be very goal-directed because of the artha concept that's associated with it. Right. So there we have a blending of motivations that are there. And it's likely going to go through it in a very rajasic, tamasic manner, only highlighted more rajasic because Venus is a rajasic planet, so it'll bring out more of the rajasic qualities of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which can then make the tamasic energy even more powerful by contrast when the tamasic energy hits.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, good. Yeah. So yeah, with the nakshatras, it definitely depends a lot on the nature of the planet that's occupying too, because the nature of the planet that's occupying is going to influence those gunas, dependent upon the guna that's associated with that particular planet. Yeah, and it's going to influence the primary motivation too. Venus would go about dharma in a different way than other planets would, and Venus is going to go about artha in a way that's different than other planets would as well. If it's not very well supported Venus, then it may become very attached to what it's trying to achieve, to the extent that it can't let go, and then thereby undergoes a lot of difficulties.
Right.
undergoes, lack of a better way to put it, a death, so to speak, so that the transformation can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Any other thoughts on Bharani?
I think that's covered it. Yeah. I would just say, it's interesting from the research that I've done. I have encountered clients with career planets in Bharani, and quite often that has been midwives, gynecologists, people along those lines. Yeah.
Right. And that would be, so you would be looking at the 10th Lord, the Atmakarka, the first house Lord, with that kind of a assessment?
I usually look at a lot of different things. I will look at the Atmakarka. I'll look at the 10th Lord. I'll also look at the 10th cusp. I find the 10th cusp to be very important. The nakshatra that the 10th cusp is in is very important. I've usually found that to have a stronger influence than the other factors that are involved in terms of career. Yeah.
So again, what you're looking at is the 10th cusp, for the simple fact, and just to remind those of you who are still working these kinds of things out, the 10th cusp, because that's what the person will be known for and take action towards in the world. And so with Bharani, having these relationships to birth and death and things of that nature, then it will color what the person is known for by the very fact that that cusp is in that nakshatra, which represents that thing, correct?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
good.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to Kritika then.